Few narratives in religious history present such a striking tension between vivid momentary presence and prolonged silence as the early life of Jesus Christ. One brief episode, recorded when he was 12 years old, stands as a rare illuminated fragment in an otherwise vast historical darkness. In that scene, he is found in the temple, engaging with religious teachers, asking questions and offering responses that astonish those considered experts in the law. It is the first recorded public emergence of a mind that appears far beyond its years, an early indication of extraordinary intellectual and spiritual awareness. And yet, immediately after this moment, the narrative falls silent. There are no accounts of adolescence, no descriptions of early adulthood, no documentation of development, relationships, or activity. Nearly 18 years disappear into historical absence before the next recorded event: his appearance at the Jordan River for baptism and the beginning of his public ministry. This silence is not merely a gap in biography, it becomes a theological and interpretive challenge that has shaped centuries of reflection. Why would the canonical texts preserve a single moment of childhood brilliance, only to omit nearly 2 decades of formative life? The question is not simply historical, it is interpretive. The silence itself demands meaning. In theological terms, it has often been understood as a form of divine concealment, where significance is not expressed through visibility, but through hidden formation. This paradox leads to a deeper inquiry. How did these 18 hidden years shape the 3 years that would later transform religious history? And more fundamentally, does unseen preparation carry more weight than public action itself? If you are following this exploration into the hidden dimensions of historical and biblical narratives, consider subscribing and following the channel. The upcoming sections will move deeper into archaeological evidence, historical context, and the lesser-known realities of life in Galilee, material that reshapes how we understand this silent period. To understand the silence of these 18 years, one must first reconstruct the environment in which they unfolded. The village of Nazareth in the 1st century was not a center of political, religious, or economic influence. It was a small rural settlement, estimated to contain roughly 400 inhabitants, positioned away from major trade routes and urban centers. Life in Nazareth was defined by subsistence, manual labor, and a constant dependence on the fragile balance of agricultural survival. Archaeological evidence from Galilee provides a clearer picture of this world. Excavations reveal that many dwellings were carved directly into soft limestone rock, forming compact, dimly lit living spaces. These homes were functional rather than comfortable, designed for survival rather than expansion. The material culture discovered in these sites, simple tools, pottery fragments, and agricultural implements, reflects a society with limited economic stratification but high dependence on physical labor. Some archaeological traditions associate nearby Galilean findings with what is sometimes referred to as the House of Jesus, although such identifications remain debated. Regardless of certainty, these discoveries collectively illustrate a consistent picture. Households were modest, tightly structured, and deeply integrated with daily labor. There was no separation between domestic life and work. Both existed within the same confined physical and social space. Within this context, the occupational identity of Jesus Christ is often understood through the lens of manual craftsmanship, commonly described as a carpenter or stoneworker. In the Galilean environment, such a role would likely involve heavy physical labor, working with stone, wood, and construction materials under demanding conditions. It was not a symbolic occupation, but a necessary one, essential for sustaining local infrastructure. The geographical proximity of Nazareth to Sepphoris adds further historical depth to this picture. Sepphoris was a major urban center undergoing extensive reconstruction during the Roman period. Its building projects required a large labor force skilled in masonry and construction. This proximity suggests the possibility that local workers from surrounding villages, including Nazareth, may have participated in large-scale Roman building efforts. If this is the case, then the so-called silent years were far from passive. Instead, they may have been filled with continuous physical labor, moving between the small stone-cut homes of Nazareth and the expanding architectural projects of Sepphoris. This would place the formative years of Jesus within a dynamic economic environment shaped by Roman imperial expansion and local subsistence survival. From a sociological perspective, such labor would have shaped not only physical endurance, but also worldview. Daily engagement with stone, construction, family responsibility, and economic necessity would create a grounded understanding of human limitation, effort, and dependence. Rather than being empty years, these hidden decades may represent a prolonged process of embodied formation, where theology, identity, and purpose were shaped through lived experience rather than public declaration. Thus, the 18-year silence is reinterpreted not as absence, but as depth. It is a period where formation occurs beneath historical visibility, within the ordinary rhythms of labor, geography, and family life in first-century Galilee. The silence surrounding the 18 hidden years becomes even more meaningful when viewed through the lens of family structure and cultural expectation in first-century Galilee. Within this framework, the life of Jesus Christ cannot be separated from the social and familial responsibilities that would have defined daily existence in a small rural village like Nazareth. Far from being an abstract or purely spiritual environment, Nazareth was a tightly woven social unit where survival depended on shared labor, generational responsibility, and strict adherence to cultural norms. One of the most significant assumptions in reconstructing this period concerns the absence of Joseph from the later narrative. Whether due to natural death or historical disappearance, Joseph no longer appears in the accounts associated with Jesus' public ministry. In a first-century Jewish household, this absence would have carried profound practical implications. The responsibility of sustaining the family would typically shift to the eldest son, who would assume the role of provider, protector, and stabilizing force within the household economy. In this context, it is historically reasonable to infer that Jesus would have become the primary economic support for his family, including his mother and siblings. This responsibility would not have been symbolic. It would have been immediate and continuous. Daily survival in an agrarian and artisan-based economy required constant labor, income generation, and physical endurance. The weight of this role would have shaped not only his schedule, but also his identity formation during these silent years. Such a role also carried emotional and psychological dimensions. In a culture where family cohesion was essential for survival, the responsibility of maintaining household stability would have required maturity far beyond chronological age. The silent years, therefore, may represent not inactivity, but sustained obligation, years defined by duty rather than visibility. To fully understand this burden, it is necessary to situate it within the broader cultural framework of Jewish society in the first century. In this world, the eldest son carried expectations that extended beyond economic provision. He was also responsible for maintaining the integrity of family tradition, religious observance, and moral conduct according to the Torah. The commandment to honor one's parents was not merely a moral suggestion, but a deeply embedded cultural and legal expectation. Within the Torah-centered worldview, honoring parents included practical care, financial support, and preservation of family honor. For someone living in Nazareth, this would mean that daily labor was not simply a means of survival, but also an act of religious obedience. The responsibility of maintaining adherence to the Torah would have shaped every dimension of life. Work, prayer, rest, and social interaction were all integrated into a single moral framework. Thus, the life of Jesus during this period, if understood within this cultural system, would have been structured by both physical necessity and religious discipline. This dual expectation created a lived reality in which labor and worship were not separate categories. Working the land, building structures, or providing for one's family were not secular activities. They were expressions of covenantal responsibility. In this sense, the silent years may be understood as a continuous practice of embodied faithfulness. Archaeological and historical studies of Galilee provide additional insight into the intellectual and religious environment of this period. Sites such as Magdala and Tel Rehov reveal a region that, while rural, was not intellectually isolated. Synagogue culture had spread widely throughout Jewish settlements, serving as centers for communal gathering, scriptural reading, and oral instruction in the Torah. These synagogues functioned as more than places of worship. They were educational spaces where young males were exposed to scripture, legal interpretation, and ethical discourse. The practice of reading and discussing the Torah in rural communities suggests that religious literacy was not confined to urban elites or the temple in Jerusalem. Instead, it permeated everyday village life. Within this environment, it is highly plausible that Jesus would have been exposed to scriptural traditions from an early age. Oral teaching, communal reading, and participation in synagogue life would have provided continuous engagement with the foundational texts of Jewish identity. This form of education was not academic in the modern sense, but relational and interpretive, transmitted through memory, repetition, and communal discussion. Thus, the intellectual development of Jesus during the silent years can be understood as a synthesis of lived experience and scriptural immersion. Physical labor and theological exposure were not separate pathways but intertwined dimensions of formation within a single cultural ecosystem. When viewed through a theological lens, the significance of this period becomes even more profound. In many modern interpretations, labor is often categorized as inferior to intellectual or spiritual activity. However, within the narrative framework of the silent years, this distinction collapses. Manual labor, family responsibility, and daily survival are not distractions from spiritual purpose. They are the very context in which character is formed. The hidden life of Jesus challenges the assumption that significance is measured by visibility. Instead, it suggests that formation occurs precisely in the ordinary and the unrecorded. The discipline required to sustain a family, the humility embedded in repetitive labor, and the obedience expressed through daily responsibility all contribute to a deeper understanding of human vocation. In this sense, labor becomes a form of moral training. It cultivates patience, resilience, and submission to necessity. It also grounds identity in reality rather than abstraction. The silent years, therefore, may be interpreted not as a pause before ministry, but as the essential foundation upon which ministry itself would later stand. This reframing transforms the meaning of hiddenness. What appears absent in the historical record is, in theological terms, deeply present in formation. The unseen years of labor, responsibility, and cultural immersion become the invisible architecture supporting the visible impact of the later public ministry. Thus, the weight of family duty and the structure of Jewish tradition do not simply explain what Jesus did during these years. They redefine what those years mean. They reveal a life shaped not by public recognition, but by sustained faithfulness within the ordinary rhythms of human existence. The trajectory of the 18 silent years becomes increasingly significant when placed against the backdrop of contemporary expectations about success, visibility, and influence. Modern culture tends to interpret value through acceleration, rapid achievement, immediate recognition, and publicly measurable outcomes. In such a framework, the life of Jesus Christ before his public ministry appears unusually delayed, even inefficient. Yet when examined more carefully, this delay begins to reveal an alternative logic, one that fundamentally challenges the modern assumption that speed and visibility are indicators of importance. In the contemporary world, success is often measured by how quickly results can be produced and how widely they can be seen. The rise of digital platforms, global communication systems, and performance-driven economies has reinforced a mindset in which delay is interpreted as weakness and invisibility as irrelevance. Individuals are encouraged to accelerate outcomes, minimize waiting periods, and translate potential into immediate public recognition. Against this backdrop, the hidden years of Jesus present a radical inversion of expectations. Rather than entering public life early or pursuing visible influence, his formative years unfold in obscurity within the rural environment of Nazareth. This obscurity is not framed as failure but as intentional preparation. It represents a model in which depth precedes visibility and formation precedes function. The contrast becomes even more pronounced when considering the structure of his later ministry. A period of approximately 3 years of public activity follows nearly 2 decades of silence. This imbalance suggests that the weight of influence is not determined by duration or exposure, but by the density of formation within hidden time. The silent years therefore challenge the assumption that effectiveness is proportional to visibility. Silence, within this interpretive framework, is not absence, but process. It functions as a form of internal testing in which identity is formed without external validation. In a public environment, behavior is often shaped by audience expectation. In contrast, hiddenness removes external reinforcement, forcing development to occur without feedback loops of recognition or approval. In the case of Jesus, the silence of these years can be understood as a space in which character is stabilized independently of public affirmation. Without crowds, followers, or recorded miracles, identity is not constructed through reaction, but through internal coherence. This creates a model of formation in which authenticity is established prior to exposure. From a theological perspective, this hiddenness also reflects a form of obedience unconditioned by visibility. Actions performed without public recognition require a different kind of discipline, one that is not sustained by applause or acknowledgement, but by internal conviction. In this sense, silence becomes a crucible in which integrity is tested and refined. The physical landscape of Galilee plays an important symbolic role in understanding this hidden formation. The region surrounding Nazareth is characterized by rolling hills, secluded valleys, and quiet rural expanses. These are not landscapes of political power or urban visibility. They are environments shaped by distance, elevation, and isolation. The hills of Galilee, in this interpretive reading, function as more than geography. They become a metaphorical space of withdrawal and reflection. In such an environment, life naturally slows down. Movement is dictated by terrain, labor is tied to seasonal cycles, and social interaction is limited by physical separation between settlements. This creates conditions in which contemplation and sustained thought are not optional but embedded in daily rhythm. Within this setting, the hidden years can be understood as a form of continuous interior formation. The silence of the landscape mirrors the silence of the narrative. Just as the hills separate villages, so too does hiddenness separate identity from public recognition. This alignment between geography and spiritual formation reinforces the idea that environment plays a crucial role in shaping internal life. Perhaps the most profound implication of this period lies in its redefinition of time itself. In conventional historical accounts, significance is often tied to recorded events, speeches delivered, actions performed, or outcomes achieved. Unrecorded time is frequently dismissed as empty or irrelevant. However, the structure of the 18 silent years challenges this assumption directly. The hidden years are not empty space between events. They are the foundation upon which later events acquire meaning. The public ministry that follows does not emerge from a vacuum, but from a long process of preparation that remains largely invisible. In this sense, unseen time functions as structural depth rather than chronological gap. This perspective suggests that the later capacity for teaching, healing, and sustained public engagement is not spontaneous. It is the result of prolonged formation in environments that do not appear in historical summaries. The authority expressed in public life is therefore rooted in private discipline. The endurance of mission is grounded in years of unobserved consistency. From this angle, the hidden years become essential rather than incidental. They provide the stability necessary for a ministry that would later face intense scrutiny, opposition, and physical demand. Without this foundation, the sustainability of such a mission would be difficult to explain. Thus, the silent years are reinterpreted as formative architecture. They support the visible structure of public life in the same way that unseen foundations support a visible building. What appears absent is, in reality, structurally indispensable. In the broader narrative that spans from Nazareth to the Jordan River, the theme of hiddenness emerges not as a deficiency, but as a design. The silence is purposeful, the delay is formative, and the unseen years are essential to understanding the coherence of what follows. After nearly 2 decades of silence, the narrative of Jesus Christ transitions abruptly from hidden formation to public emergence. The shift is not gradual, but decisive, marked by a single catalytic figure and a defining ritual moment that reorients the entire trajectory of the story. The silence is first disrupted by the appearance of John the Baptist, a prophetic voice emerging from the wilderness with an urgent message of repentance. His proclamation is not merely moral instruction, it is a historical signal that a new phase in the spiritual narrative is beginning. The wilderness setting itself reinforces the discontinuity with established religious structures, suggesting that renewal will not arise from institutional centers, but from marginal spaces. John's message carries a tone of transition. It implies that existing frameworks are insufficient and that preparation is required for something imminent. In this sense, the Jordan River becomes more than a geographical location. It becomes a threshold between preparation and fulfillment. The long silence of the previous 18 years is not negated but activated. What was once hidden is now positioned to enter visibility. When Jesus steps into this moment, he does so not as someone newly formed, but as someone already shaped through extended hiddenness. The transition is therefore not a beginning of identity, but a beginning of manifestation. The public stage does not create his mission. It reveals what has already been formed in silence. The central event at the Jordan River is the baptism itself. This ritual act carries layers of symbolic meaning: purification, identification, and transition. It represents both a public alignment with the message of repentance and a threshold into a new phase of activity. It is within this moment that the narrative introduces a decisive affirmation, a voice from heaven declaring divine approval. This moment is described not as the creation of legitimacy, but as its confirmation. The emphasis falls on recognition rather than initiation. The life that has been lived in obscurity is now publicly acknowledged as complete in its preparation. The statement of divine pleasure functions as a theological validation of the hidden years. It implies that the unseen period in Nazareth was not secondary or incomplete, but fully aligned with purpose. The approval is not directed at a single act, but at an entire mode of existence characterized by obedience, labor, and invisibility. This moment therefore reconfigures the meaning of the silent years. They are no longer interpreted as absence, but as the necessary foundation for public mission. The baptism does not replace the hidden life, it reveals its significance. What was formed in obscurity is now recognized in openness. The Jordan event thus becomes a structural pivot in the narrative. It connects hidden formation with public manifestation, ensuring that the transition is not abrupt in essence, even if it appears sudden in chronology. The movement from hidden life in Nazareth to public ministry at the Jordan River offers more than a historical or theological sequence. It presents a framework for interpreting time, formation, and human development that extends far beyond its original context. Archaeological findings from Galilee consistently describe a world defined by simplicity, manual labor, and limited economic stratification. Excavations around Nazareth and surrounding regions reveal dwellings carved into limestone, modest domestic structures, and tools associated with agricultural and artisanal work. This material record aligns closely with the narrative portrait of a life grounded in physical labor, and rural subsistence. In parallel, the scriptural narrative emphasizes the absence of recorded activity during this same period. The silence is not accidental but structurally significant. Together, archaeological and textual evidence converge on a coherent picture, a life shaped not by public visibility, but by sustained immersion in ordinary conditions. This convergence reinforces a key interpretive insight. Historical formation often occurs outside the boundaries of recorded history. What is not documented may still be deeply formative, and what appears absent may in fact be structurally essential. The overarching theme that emerges from this narrative is a radical redefinition of waiting. Time that is not publicly visible is not empty, it is formative. The years that appear absent from historical record are, in theological interpretation, the very years in which identity, endurance, and purpose are established. The life of Jesus Christ thus challenges the assumption that significance must be immediate or observable. Instead, it proposes a model in which depth precedes visibility and formation precedes function. The hidden years are not a delay in mission, they are the construction phase of mission itself. In this sense, waiting becomes active rather than passive. It is not the absence of progress, but the accumulation of internal strength that will later sustain public responsibility. This reinterpretation of hidden time carries profound implications for modern life. Individuals today frequently experience periods that appear unproductive or invisible, years spent studying, working in ordinary conditions, or navigating personal isolation. These phases are often judged by external standards of productivity and recognition. However, the narrative structure explored here suggests a different reading. Periods of invisibility may in fact be the most formative stages of development. Academic preparation, professional labor, emotional endurance, and private struggle can all function as spaces where capacity is built without external acknowledgement. In this framework, unseen time becomes the most critical form of preparation. Just as the silent years in Nazareth preceded a brief but historically transformative ministry, so too can modern periods of obscurity precede moments of significant impact. Ultimately, the passage from silence to public emergence redefines how value is understood. It suggests that what is most important in human development is often not what is visible but what is faithfully formed in hiddenness.